So to begin, I make sure I've got my 3-inch needle, my coiling cord, and about 8 to 10 feet of my first color yarn. So I am going to measure that out. So that's about 1 foot. 2 hand lengths is about 1 foot. So we can measure it that way, or we could take our arms and stretch them out long and take 2 of our wingspans, which should be around 10 feet. And in order to thread our needle, it's a pretty big eye on our needle, so we could just kind of hold the tip of the yarn tight, kind of wiggle it through. If that isn't working for you, if it's kind of splaying and pulling apart and you can't just like pull it through this way, then you can create a little tiny piece of folded paper that fits through your needle like that, or the eye of the needle. And you can lay your yarn inside of that fold, close it inside, and then press the paper through the eye of the needle and then just remove the paper. That can help you thread your needle. And after I get the needle threaded with the yarn, I'm gonna pull the yarn all the way through so it's folded in half. So the halfway mark is right at the eye of the needle, and then the 2 loose ends are gathered together at the opposite side. There's no need to tie a knot anywhere. So I've got my needle on one end, and then I've evened up the yarn so it's the same length on the other end. And I'm ready to begin. So I'm gonna take that doubled up end, I'm gonna take my coiling cord, and I'm going to lay I'll lay my yarn with the loose ends in along the length of my coiling cord, so it's about the length of my thumb that's covering the cord. And then I don't need to use the needle right now. I'm just going to hold it tight and then wrap those 2 pieces of yarn that are gathered together away from me. And I want to leave a little bit of that white cord peeking out at the end. That will help actually create the first spiral later on. And we'll just start wrapping it away from us around the cord right next to our previous wraps. We're trying not to leave any little white spaces in between and keep those 2 pieces of yarn kind of smooth and gathered together, and we're just wrapping it away so it's nice and tight and even and as smooth as it can be. And don't worry about this little bit of white right now. We'll get that covered up in a second. Need enough to kind of fold it over on itself and start to spiral it in. So I'm not quite there. I'm going to wrap it a few more times. And you'll notice that those 2 pieces might start to get twisted just because of the wrapping. I'm going to take and smooth those back out and let it kind of untwirl every so often. And then we can hold that tight so it doesn't start to unravel. Make sure that all those pieces are really scooted together well. So I've found a few things after trying this so many times to figure out how to make this the best it can be. I've found that pushing this in more like the shape of a little raindrop is the easiest to do this next part. And I like to make sure that the white that's showing here matches the amount of white that's showing here. So I try to make sure that they're kind of on the same page here before I start to squeeze this in. And then once you get this little loop here, and don't worry if there's a little bit of a gap, that'll fill in when we start to do this next part. You've just gotta squeeze this really, really tight. So I'm like even using my nail a little bit and digging into the core while I'm really pinching it strong with this thumb and this finger. And I've gotta hold it there until I get my next stitches in. So while we're really holding it, and don't let it go, this is one of the hardest parts. You just gotta really stay strong. Even if your hand gets tired, just keep squeezing it. You're gonna come through the middle of that hole and pull your yarn through. This first one we're gonna wrap towards us. So we're kind of hugging this loose piece in, and we wanna keep it there. So that's gonna keep it in place, and we're gonna put our needle through again, pull it all the way through, so that's gonna hold this one, kind of put it where you want it to be. I wanna put it kind of closer to this end so that it holds. Really pull it tight and then wrap it away from you and go around the opposite side and come back through. And be careful not to go through the yarn, try to go next to the yarn. So pull it through, let it kind of hug in, and then we're gonna find a different spot. So my first one was right there. I'm gonna come over here a little bit of ways. We don't wanna keep going in the same spot because then it'll get too bulky. We're gonna come back through the middle, pull it nice and tight, and then maybe we'll come one more time around this other side just to really hold it in there strong. And I'm gonna come a little closer in this time because I wanna start wrapping it over here next. If I'm all the way over here, then I'm gonna be making a big bulky overlap. So I'm gonna come through closer to where I wanna continue that wrapping. I'm gonna come through the middle. So it's gonna pull that one tight again. And now it's already starting to hold together. It's a little bit pulling apart, so this next part is also really important. Keep holding it really strong. We don't wanna let it open up here because it's gonna wanna try. So keep holding it tight, keep pinching it, and then you're gonna wrap around the back. And then for this little bit, you're gonna be wrapping around these two pieces together as if they're one. And that's gonna really help to start to hold it together even more. So we're gonna wrap a few times around that space and then start to wrap it up your single piece of the coiling cord. And if it starts to get curled up, uncurl it and keep wrapping. It just keeps the wrap a little bit cleaner looking. And we wanna come up a little ways, so it kinda looks like a little spoon right now. And once we wrap up a little bit further here, we're going to start to create our first spiral. So my loose end I know is right here. It spirals around, so I'm gonna push it in so that it comes in like this. Don't worry if there's a little bit of white showing here because we can actually cover it up right now with our first stitch. I'm actually going to reverse a few of these loops. I'm just gonna come back. I'm a little too far along there. I wanna be closer to that spot where it's white. So I'm just gonna pull it back a few times. That's better. I'm gonna scoot it in. And I'm gonna really pinch it tight. And this is where I'm gonna use the needle again. So I'm gonna curl it around the back. I'm kind of lined up right where I wanna cover up that white, and I wanna push it through the spiral right next to that white. We're pretty close to it. So let's come through that little spot in the middle. We're gonna pull it tight. Oopsie, keep it. It's gonna wanna try to pull apart. This little middle part is the hardest part to get tight. So we're gonna wrap it away from us, but around both of these, and then hold that tight while we stitch through one more time. And every time we add a stitch from here on out, we're gonna go through 2 times in the same spot. So I'm trying to get it right in the same spot as I did before. I'm gonna pull that first one tight. I'm gonna go around again. And then I'm gonna come through the middle because I'm gonna do 2 stitches here and I'm gonna do 2 stitches right here. So I'm gonna come through the middle, a little further down. So this time I'm trying to line it up with where I want that stitch to go here. So I'm gonna pull through the middle, pull it tight, keep squeezing. We're gonna wrap it around 2 again, so I've got a little space between these. I'm gonna wrap it around 2 pieces of that coiling cord, pull it through the middle one more time, and then around one more time. This time we're not going through with the needle. We're going to hold it tight, keep squeezing. We're gonna sneak that little yarn over here in between those 2 pieces. Kind of get it as close as you can to where you left off and then keep twirling. And those 2 spots where our first 2 holding stitches are really gonna help that spiral. So now I can let go. It's still gonna wanna try to pull apart, but as I continue to build those spirals around, it's gonna get stronger and stronger. If when you're trying to do this, it starts to slip off of the end, before it does, see if you can push it back onto the cord. And if it completely comes off of the end, you may have to untwist it and just start again. I had to start over a few times when I was first learning how to do this So if that happens to you, if you're kind of trying to do this first little stitch and get it started and it's falling off of the end of the cord, it's easier just to undo it and start over with the wrapping from the beginning. I know it seems like a lot to just start over, but it's really the best thing you can do because it really doesn't take much to untwirl it and just start again, and you'll have a much cleaner looking middle of your bowl when you're all said and done, because there's no way to reverse it once you're a few rows in. It's just too much work to reverse it. So now's the time to start over if it's not looking clean or if it's getting too bulky in one spot. Once you pull that spiral in, if none of the white is showing and it's looking pretty clean, you can just go right where you left off from your last twirl, and that's where your first stitch can be. So the only reason I had that stitch kind of in on my other example is because I had that little bit of that white cord showing in that spot. But if you don't have that, you can just go right to the end and you'll pull it through twice, going over 2 cords together. 2 stitches will be stronger to hold it in that spot. Just make sure those stitches land right where you want them to be. My thread's getting a little too short to do this, so this is gonna be my last stitch. I don't even know if I can do that last stitch. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to back it up. I think it's time. I'm gonna just cut that off actually. And I think it's time to show you how to switch to a new color. So I'm gonna pull that last stitch back through. First step is getting our new piece of yarn cut and threaded through the needle the same as before. All right, I don't need that tail to be quite that long from the last piece, so I'm just gonna trim it a little shorter. And then I'm going to pull it along the length of the cord. You can kind of twist it a loose twist so it just stays kind of wrapped. Then we're gonna take our new color, our new piece, doesn't have to be a different color yet if we don't want it to be. We're gonna take our new piece and we're going to lay that with it. And now, getting this started is a little tricky. You just gotta hold everything in place. We're gonna come around and right next to our last wrap. So we're gonna cover up all these little loose tails here with our wrapping. We've still got loose pieces here. Once we got enough for a stitch, I think that looks like a good distance away from the last stitch. We don't wanna go too far because then it will not hold as well. We'll take our needle, and we only ever want to go through 2 rows at a time. So I'm coming still back up through the middle. Once I get around to that 3rd row, I'm start only coming to the 2nd layer and not through the middle.